You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. There is something that goes on at this time of the year, second, third, fourth week of August, that is so specific to this time of the year that it would almost be irresponsible of me not to talk about it. I feel like there's this free-floating anxiety that occurs in people. And yeah, I think it has to do with the conditioning that we've all had at this time of the year to get out of summer mode, get back into school mode. It is back to school. I think actually this week is when schools open again. And, nobody wants to let go of summer, especially if you live somewhere where the weather isn't always sunny and warm and gorgeous all the time. Here in Montreal, the summers are that. They're sunny and they're, well, hopefully mostly sunny, but warm and beautiful. And, there's color. There's blue in the sky and the sun is yellow and the grass is green and the trees are green. It's lush. And our winter is very much not that. If you've never been here in winter, you probably don't have any good reason to come unless you ski, in which case, you won't be in Montreal proper. You'll be around Montreal. But there's something, I guess, about knowing that we're letting go of the summer, letting go of the warmth, letting go of the color, letting go of that almost oversaturation of the senses, and gearing back up for autumn, which is beautiful here, but then what comes after? Hashtag winter is coming. But it also has to do with school, with the stress of school and the rules according to which we need to adhere in order to get back into the educational system. And listen, even if we haven't gone to school in years, decades, I think that free-floating anxiety remains with us. I know it does with my mom. She talks about it every time of the year, or every year at this time of the year. And I see it with a lot of people around me, a lot of students, just generally speaking. There is more fatigue. There is more stress at this time of the year. And something that has come up over the past week with a couple of people who I've spoken to, which on the one hand is surprising to me, but on the other hand is not when I put it into the context of this time of the year, is I've had two people ask me over the past week, how do you learn to love yourself? There's this expression that tells us that we need to learn how to love ourselves before we are going to be able to love someone else. And I have always had a real problem with that expression, especially as a kid, because as a kid, I went through a lot of soul searching and a lot of trying to find my way in the world and figure out my own identity. And I felt like it was insulting to say to me anyway, as a kid, like, you're not going to be able to love anybody until you figure out how to love yourself. And that's where the expression ends. There's no further instructions. No one tells you how to love yourself. No one says, well, this is what you do. And I always thought that was just unbelievably insulting and ridiculous. And I thought, that does not prevent me from loving someone else. I can very much love someone else even if I'm not sure where I stand with myself, if I haven't fully gotten on board with loving myself. And I remember also thinking, what the hell does that mean? What does that mean, love yourself? I wasn't sure if it meant that I was just constantly feeling myself up everywhere I went, which is just lewd and obscene. I really used to take an issue with it. And over the past week, two people have approached me, people who are adults, people who are still seeking and they're still trying to figure out their way forward and what their path is. And they're trying to make the corrections, right? They're trying to make the corrections that they feel are necessary in order for them to be, more aligned with their higher self, more aligned with their ideal self, more aligned with who and how they want to be in the world. So, how do you learn to love yourself? Well, I have figured out, I'd say over the past 10, 15 years, how to approach this question and how to make sense of it and how not to just completely reject it because the wording of it seems so alienating and unhelpful. the answer that I gave to both the people who asked me this question this week was this: that it's not a question of just, oh, boom, okay, you love yourself. Great, I did it. I figured it out. It's not like a light switch that goes on. It is a process. And the process begins with accepting yourself. It begins with accepting who you are and how you are in all situations, not just in the situations where things are great and where you're, unbelievably gregarious and popular and you look great and your weight's exactly where you want it to be and, you got money in the bank and everything's, amazing, social media worthy. Let's advertise and sell ourselves and show everybody how amazing our life is. #blessed. By the way, I hate that hashtag. Anyway, I digress. That's another podcast. It's about accepting yourself. It's about accepting who and how you are in situations that maybe don't go according to plan or don't go according to the way you want them to go. It's about accepting who you are when there is rage and when there is intolerance, and when there is jealousy, when there is self-loathing, when there is impatience, disappointment, judgment. I know that when I am driving, when I am in traffic and I am driving, there is no yoga teacher or meditation teacher or any higher self present for a couple of split seconds at certain moments. Very quickly I jump into emotional reaction. Very quickly it's very much, if I see any car, any license plate that isn't from Quebec on the road in front of me and they're driving questionably, I immediately judge them and identify them as where they're from. So if that license plate is, I don't know, from like Virginia and they're driving, I will out loud say to them, really, Virginia? Like, really? Did you need to do, 20 kilometers an hour when, everyone else is trying to get somewhere? So listen, I can be impatient when I'm driving. And I have learned to check myself when that happens, when that judgment comes up and those comments come out of my mouth. I check myself and I immediately either practice compassion, understand that maybe they're in a different city, they don't know where they're going, or whatever the scenario is that I conjure up, and it makes me feel better. It reduces my blood pressure, my tension, and it makes me not such a horrible person in that moment. But listen, for a fraction of a second, I am that person, and I know that's where I go, and I know that's how I show up, and I've learned to think that it's kind of funny. I don't do any harm, at least not, indelibly when this occurs, and I've learned to accept that this is how I am in those situations, and to laugh at it, and to let it be the catalyst for change. So it's not like I'm going to pretend that I'm not that guy in those situations. I am that guy. I'm fully that guy. I own it. And to be honest, part of me is kind of proud of it. I don't know why, and I don't know what that pride is based in, but I like knowing that I can, I can call out someone who isn't participating according to the rules of society the same way everyone else is, or at least my society. So listen, it's massively intolerant. I own it. I do what I need to do to get past it and to not let it become a pattern. But listen, there are moments where it happens. And it happens. And I own it. And I'm not going to apologize for it. And I think it's kind of funny. I think that we all need to take a look at the moments when we show up in ways that are less than fantastic, in ways that are less than PR worthy. And instead of trying to name it by something else or call it, by a name that everyone else would think is okay, instead of trying to rename it or completely ignore it, shut it out, pretend, oh yeah, no, that's not me, it doesn't happen. I think that we need to own it. And we need to accept that part of being, a 360-degree full spectrum human being is there are going to be moments where we aren't our best selves. That's it. There are going to be moments where we sort of by default And by habit and by pattern, we fall into emotional reaction. And those emotional reactions are not always going to be fantastic. To walk around ashamed of who we are in those moments, for the most part, is unhelpful. I think that we need to take responsibility for how we are. We definitely need to take responsibility for how and when and if we are hurting other people in those moments, because that obviously that begs attention and correction. But if no one is getting hurt and we're just not proud of the behavior that's coming up in certain situations, okay, you know what? Yes, we can make the corrections and we can tweak it until we are closer to self-awareness. Moments when we understand it's happening and can have this internal dialogue with ourselves and reframe a situation and breathe deeper and, get back to center. But I think it's also vitally important that we understand that this is who I am when certain things occur. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Some people are triggered because that behavior reminds them of someone they don't want to be. And again, that process of understanding, that process of rationalizing is essential to dealing in a healthy way, to responding to it. Again, instead of just reacting to it or pretending it doesn't exist. But I believe that the first step, if there even is such thing as loving yourself, the first step is accepting yourself. And part of that acceptance, by the way, also includes forgiving yourself. It includes forgiving yourself for the behavior. It includes forgiving yourself for things that you may have done in the past when there was just that shift to emotional reaction. There was no micro fraction of a second between stimulus and response. There was no better version of you that could, for lack of a better term, practice self-awareness or practice yoga or practice, and I don't mean the physical practice of yoga, but just that deep breath, take responsibility, don't move into emotional reaction kind of moment. We need to forgive ourselves. Every single one of us has screwed up. Every single one of us has jumped to a conclusion. Every single one of us has jumped into an emotion and allowed that emotion to spur us into action. And we have all fucked up. Every single one of us. There isn't one person who is listening to this. There's not one person on earth who is not screwed up at some point. And so for the moments where we have screwed up, especially if other people were aware of it, or especially if other people were hurt by it, number one, we need to do what we can to make it better so those who may have been harmed have more information, and we have done all we can to gain their forgiveness. But we also need to forgive ourselves. We need to accept that, you know what, in that moment, given everything I may have been carrying, maybe it was the best I could do. And maybe it wasn't the best I could do right now, and maybe it wasn't someone else's best, but it was the best. And hopefully, given an opportunity in the future to, or being put in a similar context or situation in the future, I will do differently. I will learn from this, and maybe setting an intention for that. But accepting all aspects of who we are is to forgive ourselves for the moments and the sides to our personality that perhaps we're not so proud of. We don't need to be proud of them, but we need to understand that they are part of who we are. They need to understand that it's normal, and we need to understand that we need to forgive ourselves. So the first step towards, quote, loving yourself, end quote, is accepting yourself and forgiving yourself. And again, it doesn't mean that you don't make the corrections to do and be better, to be more aligned with your highest self. But it means that you forgive yourself for being less than you would have wanted to be. Forgiving yourself for not doing the honorable or right thing when you had the chance to, but you didn't have the presence of mind to do something other than move into the emotional reaction. Then we need to honor ourselves. And what that means is treat ourselves in a way that we would treat someone who we love the most. To honor all of those aspects of who we are. To understand that that's what makes us who we are as individuals in these bodies on this planet. to understand that there is only one of every single one of us in all of time, and to see that as a bit of a miracle, and then to understand that part of that one are these aspects. That's what makes you you. It's what makes me me. And these things need to be honored. They need to be celebrated. They need to be identified as perfectly unique. I think one of the greatest ongoing lessons we need to learn in the process of accepting ourselves and honoring ourselves is trying to learn how to be in relationship to the body that we find ourselves in, especially when we are at the mercy of the changes it is going through. Many people have trouble accepting themselves when they have identified themselves as being the body and what happens to it. When there is stuff going on with the body, I mean, listen, this week I have been out. I've been pretty much lying down for a good part of the week because I threw my back out last week. The story is that on the balcony that we have here at home, a couple of weeks, well, more like about a month and a half ago, pigeons started to nest. And we let them nest. We let them nest, and 2 eggs were hatched, and then all of a sudden these little babies came out of the eggs, and it took them about 5-6 weeks to grow up. And at first it was adorable, and I was, filming it, and they were tiny and they were beautiful, and they got older and they were still beautiful, but man, did they make a mess on that balcony. So finally the babies grew up and flew away last week. Once they were gone, I decided I needed to clean the balcony. Properly clean the balcony. And I had researched how to do it. I knew that you needed to get a mask and get, gloves and use really crazy harsh chemicals, and to really do whatever you had to do in order to make sure that, any germs were taken away that may have been left over from the birds and their nest. And listen, I have a dog, so my dog goes out on the balcony, and I wanted to make sure that the dog wasn't going to pick anything up. Long story short, in, pouring bleach on the balcony, I didn't want to get my feet in the bleach, so I had 1 foot inside our place and 1 foot on the rail of the balcony as I was leaning over and twisting and cleaning. Anyway, long story short, I threw my back out. And so I've been on my back this week. I haven't been to the gym. I leave in a few days to go to Greece to give the yoga and meditation vacation there. And it has been, again, an exercise in observation in learning how to be with myself when the body isn't allowing me to function at the level that I typically do, which is a big test for me. And a friend of mine whose mother is suffering from ALS was describing to me what her mother is going through, knowing that there is this personality inside a body that doesn't function the way it needs to function. How do you make peace with yourself? How do you accept and honor yourself when something like that is happening? Well, listen, I think that in moments like that, we are asked to learn that we are not the body. The first spiritual teaching is you are not your body. And so if you're not your body, what are you? Well, you're the awareness that can observe when there's something going on with the body. That's what spirituality tells us. It teaches us this. And so I don't know if this is too complex or too abstract for you all to wrap your brains around or to get on board with. And to be frank, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just trying to give a perspective that is a great practice, because it is a practice that every one of us is going to need at a certain point in this experience of being human. The body will fail us. That's how it works. And so how do we make peace with ourselves if we think that we are the body that at a certain point we are going to be at the mercy of? The greatest spiritual practice any of us can apply on an ongoing basis, that's what makes it a practice, is to understand that we are this power of observation, this intellect, this energy in the body that uses the body to express itself into the world, but ultimately, which is not the body. And maybe learn to love ourselves as that energy and to understand just how mysterious and powerful that is. This energy that propels us into the world and that gives this body, animation, and that expresses itself and is responsible for this Brahmness this personality that comes out of this body that everybody can identify as being Bram. You know, you have that. That is who and what you are as well. In moments where the body is failing or the body is not performing at the level you need it to perform, ask yourself whether you are whatever's happening to the body or whether you can simply observe it. And maybe that's the path towards self-acceptance and towards self-understanding and to honoring yourself. I want to make sure that every one of us understands that this process of loving yourself is really a process of understanding yourself, accepting yourself, honoring yourself, and understanding that, yes, little corrections and changes can be made, and we can see it all through different lenses and perspectives. But ultimately, does that bring us to a place of loving ourselves? I don't know. I think it may bring us to a place where there is peace, and that, to me, is really close to the vibration of love. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about it. I'd be curious to hear what your journey has been about finding the path or finding your way towards loving yourself and being good with yourself. Feel free to leave comments. Feel free to reach out and let me know. I think that every single one of us will find our own way towards that, hopefully. But what happens is that we find our way towards that. We need to be good in these bodies. We need to make the most of this time that we have in these bodies with ourselves and with each other. And I really believe that only happens through understanding, acceptance, honoring, and maybe having some sort of spiritual practice to make sense of it all. Anyway, think about it. Feel free to reach out. Let me know what comes up for you. And I'll see you later. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.